Hello, everybody. We're happy that you're joining us in What Do You Believe? And we're happy that you're here. And I'm not gonna take your time anymore. I'm gonna make sure that you have your time to
Oh,
ask
thanks so
questions.
much, David.
Welcome, doctor. We have Dr.
Thank
Nagy
you.
Eskandar with us.
Thanks.
We're happy that you're here. Dr. Nagy is a medical doctor. He's practiced surgery for 25 years in the UK, and he's also the fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons in England. And doctor, we were talking about a lot of stuff, but we're
Yeah,
gonna try to go back into the idea of dinosaurs becoming birds, and
right.
can that happen? How is it happening?
Ex
Why and all that?
exactly. And we have seen the difference between the structure of a dinosaur and the bird. And there is change of all the organs, really. The respiratory system has to change, the bones has to change, the muscles has to change. He has to develop wings, and in the wings he has to fill feather. And the feather is a very complicated structure, by the way, and it's very important. So there are major problems. If really dinosaurs became birds, we must have intermediates in the fossil record to show us there are intermediate stages developing from dinosaur into bird. So let us see this on the screen here now. The National Geographic, which is a very respected paper, scientific paper, in 1999 said feathers for T-Rex. Wow, that's brilliant news. New bird-like fossils are missing links in dinosaurs' evolution. They found the missing link. Wow, that's great news to them. So they put that in the first page of the issue of this magazine, the Natural Geographic, and they put this picture, Archaeopter, and it is half of it is a bird and half of it is a dinosaur. So they put that and said birds are theropods just as confidently as we say humans are mammal. So they said, confidently, we believe now we found the missing link. That took few months to examine that specimen again. It came from China, and it was actually a very clever farmer in China who brought part of a dinosaur and part of a bird, fossils, and he glued them together very, very carefully, and he sold it to this paper, and the science started to study it, say, oh, wow, we have now the bird and the dinosaur, that's the intermediate. And they were rejoicing in that, and they discover it was a fraud. But the problem is, it came on the first page of this great paper, the National Geographic. But when they denied it a few months later, it was just 2 little lines at the back. How many people looked at the first page and the cover of that article? And how many people examined the apology that was written in the paper a few months later? So they never found the intermediate between dinosaurs and birds. And really, I would love if any of the people who are watching us now will find any paper or any evidence of that, will be delighted to receive this information and will be very happy to discuss it honestly and with scientific mind to see if that's really an intermediate. So this is the problem. We start with an assumption that dinosaurs became birds, and as a result, these fake things can come our way, and we start thinking this is the truth, but it isn't. Now, let me take you to another example, which is still in some of the biology books. So let us see that on the screen. That's Ernest Haeckel, who was really evolutionist, and he looked at the embryos of different animals and birds, and he said the stages of development of the embryo goes as the evolution from fish to reptiles, to amphibians and reptiles and birds. And he said all the embryology of those creatures are very similar to each other. And there is a point when they differentiate into different species. So he had this drawing, which is still, unfortunately, in some of the biology books. And he started with the fish, and he gave us the embryology of a fish, and then tortoise, and this is the embryology of it, and then the chicken, and then the rabbits, and then the humans. And he said that in the early stages of development, all vertebrate embryos are remarkably similar. He said remarkably similar. And he had this different embryos pictures and said this is called the recapitulation of the embryos, and they are all similar and trying to confirm the idea of evolution. Now, that was discovered to be fraud. Those pictures are completely wrong. And I'm not saying they're completely wrong in my mind. Let me just give you the statement from Stephen Jay Gould, who is an evolutionist, completely evolutionist, doesn't believe the Bible at all. But his comments on Haeckel's embryology structure, Haeckel has exaggerated the similarities by idealization or omission. So if there is something slightly similar, he made it big similar. Or if it's completely different, he omit the differences. He also, in some cases, in a procedure that can only be called fraudulent, simply copied the same figure over and over again. Because he's starting with evolutionary mind, he wanted to see all the embryology in different creatures at the same, by omitting some observations or exaggerating some similarities, and he made all these diagrams that is completely wrong. I'm not saying completely wrong because I assess them as completely wrong. It's assessed by the scientists who believe in evolution, saying what Haeckel has done is completely wrong.
But that doesn't necessarily disprove anything that we've been saying as how that relates to creationism, either does it? Because like we said, if everything had one designer, then it could have similarities across different types of classes of living things, right?
Yeah. But Haeckel was trying to tell us that embryology, studying embryology, confirms that we came from one common ancestor. When we examined all his drawings, we discovered they are not true. We are talking about a creation event, which is supernatural act of God, and there are similarities because we have same common designer. So if we find similarities, they are not identical as Haeckel tried to convince us they are identical. They are not. But if we find similarities from the perspective of the creation, according to the Bible, we can find similarities, yes. But they are completely, you know, in the embryo, there are something called like gills, and they thought that this is the fish. But these gills are actually called pharyngeal pouches, which form some of the middle part of our face and the thyroid and the glands here in the middle. So they look like slits. But this slits is not like the fish. It is called pharyngeal pouches, which produces some different organs altogether. So that is the difference. So he saw a similarity between the embryo and the fish and the humans, but this slit is completely different in the fish compared to the human function, pharyngeal pouch. So when we go deeper into the operational science, and that's what we'd like, and that's what we believe in, and that's what we really trust, and compare it to the biblical understanding of creation, we find that makes sense. You remember, we had the glasses of the Christian looking through the Bible to the world, and another person looking with the idea of there is no God. And we compare the two, and we're still comparing each position, and we're finding that the creation position is more logical and more compatible with the operational science. Right. So let us take ourselves to another event in history. Nebraska Man. In 1922, they discovered something, and I'll show you what is this something in a minute, saying this is the ape man. This is the intermediate between humans and apes. And they call it Nebraska Man because the fossil was discovered in Nebraska area. And they drew this man and his wife and the area that he lived in and the animals around him. Do you know what they discovered? They discovered one tooth. One tooth. Can you imagine for one tooth you can build all of this structure? I think you need a lot of imagination, massive amount of imagination. In 1928, they discovered that this tooth belongs to an extinct species of pig. It doesn't belong to humans at all. I'd like you to imagine if you are a Christian living in 1922 And you had all the papers and all the newspaper, and there was no television, I don't think, at the time. But if the television and radio saying, we found Nebraska Man, he is the intermediate between humans and the apes, you might think, oh, I shouldn't really disbelieve in what I am listening to, and I'll just say the Bible is wrong. Wait till 1928 when they discover that this is completely fake. If you want really to see Nebraska Man, this is Nebraska Man, this little pig coming through. That's Nebraska Man. And this is history. You can read that in the newspaper, on the internet, and people can review all this information. We are not making this information up at all. We don't do that in this program. We have everything documented, and we're happy for people to come back and challenge us of what we are saying.
Yes, I mean, we everybody that's watching, we encourage you in this show, like Doctor said, to go out there, do your research, ask questions, trying to find the truth. We're not here for just head knowledge. You want to like do your own research and find the truth for yourself and prove it for yourself. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. So stay right here.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like a copy of this episode, please call 714-709-4300 or email us at info@alkarmatv.com. You can also visit our website at www.alkarmatv.com. Also, you can write to P.O. Box 3610, Seal Beach, California 90740.
Welcome back to What Do You Believe? And Doctor, we're talking about biological evolution.
Exactly. And we have seen that dinosaurs really to become birds, that's a big leap of faith really to believe that happened. There is no fossil evidence of that. And we have seen some frauds, if you like, of people imagining birds and dinosaurs fossils together. And we discovered that's not real. And we have seen also the Nebraska Man, when they found one tooth and they thought this is the intermediate between apes and man, and they discovered this is an extinct pig. So now let us concentrate on the biology again. And remember, we are talking about biological evolution, and we're talking about geological evolution and cosmological evolution, the Big Bang. So we'll come back to the biology, and here we meet Charles Darwin. And Charles Darwin really is the person who made the idea of evolution very popular after his journey to the Galapagos Islands. So let me give you the background and some history about Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was born in south of England in 1809, and he came from a very reasonable family. So when he was about 15, 16 years of age, his father sent him to Edinburgh to learn to be a doctor. I live in Glasgow, actually, just 50 miles from Edinburgh. So he went to Edinburgh, and at the time, the development of anesthesia was not great. So he had seen a very aggressive operations like amputation without any analgesia and things like that. So he came back to his dad and said, I don't want to be a doctor anymore, and I'm just stopping studying medicine. So his dad really thought about a good career for his son. And the good career at the time is to be a vicar in the Church of England. So he went to theology college in Cambridge, and he studied theology for about 3 years, and he came out and saying, I don't believe any of that. So he can't be appointed as a minister or a vicar. At this time, he was a very good observant, by the way, and he liked biology. So there was a big journey called the Beagle, and we'll see from the internet, actually, I got this picture of the ship, which is called the Beagle. And the Beagle was traveling from England to South America. And the captain usually have a team with him of different disciplines, One of them was biology, and Darwin was selected to go on that journey. So he spent about 5 years in the South America, and he went to the Galapagos Islands. And in the Galapagos Islands, he noted that there is a type of birds called the finch. And this finch, he found that the peak of them is different from one island to another, depending on the type of food available in these islands. So he found some are pointed, some are wide, some are peaked, and that is really to help the bird to eat the type of food available in this island. So he started to think, saying, okay, the environment decides who should live in that particular area. And the example was the finch. So he started to think of origin of species, and he wrote a book called Origin of Species, depending on natural selection from the environment. And then he wrote another book called The Descent of Man, thinking we are all came from one common ancestor, that's imaginary common ancestor. We don't have fossils for this common ancestor at all. And from that, we started to divide. This actually a very old sort of idea, which was there during Greek time, but it became more popular when Darwin started to write these two books. But Darwin, when he went to the Galapagos Islands, he was influenced by another very important person called Charles Lyell. We'll see these two people on our screen. 2009 was called the year of Darwin because there was 200 years since he was born, and that was celebrated all over the world. But Darwin was affected by another person called Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell was a lawyer, but he was interested in geology. And he came with the idea of uniformitarian geology. That means the same rate of deposition and erosion of the mountains, for example, is constant all the time. And we should study geology without referring to the catastrophic Noah's flood. We should start studying geology as if the books of Moses were never written. So let us come and understand more about this uniformitarian geology. There was an engineer called James Hutton, he was English, and he said, the past history of our group must be explained by what we can see to happen now. The operation that's happening now of deposition and erosion are the same rates that happened in the past. That's a big assumption. He refused the idea of a volcanic eruption causing an island to move, like what we discussed in tsunami. He can say, oh, that can happen from time to time, but in general, we have to accept that the rate of change is constant. And that's what's called uniformitarian geology. This is a very important word, actually. He said, no powers to be employed that are not natural, just the natural events that he sees at his own time. No action to be admitted except those which we can know the principle of. So James Hutton started the idea of uniformitarians, but surely general deluge from no part of the theory of the earth. So he said the flood of Noah has no place in understanding the geology of the earth. So he omitted a big trunk of information, because the geology of the flood really explains lots of how these layers were deposited, and it explains the fossils brilliantly. So he said, we have just to know that the earth was made to sustain life. So we are not accepting this catastrophic event of Noah. And he came with the principle, the present is the key to the past. So what we see now in the present is the key to what happened in the past. We have a different view. The past is the key of at the present. See the different understanding? What happened in the past, like the Noah's flood, is the way to understand the fossils now. It's not the fossils which will give us the history of the past. So these are the two different viewpoints that in conflict with each other. And that's really the battleground, if you like. So Charles Lyell went with this idea of uniformitarian, and he said, if the history of the earth is formed of millions and millions of years, now this evolution can start to work. by mutation and natural selection, mutation, natural selection. But when we study mutation, natural selection, we'll discover they are not creative power anyway. But he needed this length of time to explain his idea. So let us watch this video, which will explain, is the present the key to the past or not? Let us watch the video together.
When we look at geological features around the world, many of them are radically different from anything being formed today, like thick mud layers over continents, or coal seams covering entire states, or fossil graveyards, or frozen mammoths, or miles of underground cave passages, or thick ice sheets moving over continents, or craters of supervolcanoes, or canyons cut thousands of feet deep. It looks like the present is not the best way to explain the geological features of the past. The Bible, however, offers another way to explain features from the past. Noah's flood was a global judgment, a violent catastrophe upon the earth. Based on this truth revealed in God's Word, scientists are developing a series of models to explain how the flood and its aftermath could have shaped the world today. In the course of the flood, erosion washed away mountains of rock in some places, while miles of mud and sand were piled up in others. The earth's crust was thickened in some places and thinned in others. Like jostled ice cubes sink and bob up to their proper level in the water, some sections of land sank after the flood, while other sections rose. Supervolcanoes and superquakes rocked the world after the flood. As the centuries passed, the catastrophes became rarer and smaller. Modern earthquakes and volcanoes are dim leftovers from this violent period of Earth history. Warm oceans after the flood produced violent weather, possibly even hypercanes, huge hurricanes like the Great Red Spot on Jupiter, which may have persisted for centuries. High rainfall after the flood filled enormous lakes, eroded large canyons, and carved cave systems. As animals left the ark, multiplied and spread over the earth, many of them were preserved as fossils. Some were buried in ash and mud. Some were preserved by unique chemical conditions, and others were frozen. Truly, the present is not the way things were in the past. Instead, the Bible is the key to help us understand geological features around the world.
I think this video is very important because it explains, if we consider the history of the Bible, and there is a universal flood at Noah's time, and that flood lasted for 371 days, and the fountains of the deep were opened, and the rain came for 40 days and 40 nights, and the subterranean water came up, and the changes in the mountains and in the valleys, and the fossilization that happened during this time. That's why you find some marine animals fossilized on the top of the mountain. How did they come to the top of the mountain? They didn't have an escalator or a lift to take them up and get fossilized at the top. That means the mountain was covered by water for some time, and the water receded, and these marine animals were fossilized at the top of the mountain. You find that in different parts of the world. So the uniformitarian geologists will say this is a local event. But you find that in America, for example, in the Grand Canyon, which I visited myself, and you find it in the Himalaya in India, and you find it in different parts of the world. So local, there is a universal flood in the Bible that can explain it all together. So the film is very important because it tells us that what we see now is the effect of the history of things that happened in the past. The uniformitarian refuse this idea, and they say what happened in the past, they were not there to observe the past, but they say what happened in the past is the same rate that's what's happening now. So this is the different way of thinking. That's why we come to millions of years and thousands of years.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
And thank you, Francesca. A scientist is never certain. We absolutely must leave room for doubt, or there is no progress and there is no learning. that was said by Richard Feynman. So maybe we need a little bit of doubt. So just ask yourself today, what do you believe? Thank you for watching.